So I talked about Mahmoud Khalil a bit when I made that video about how Ethan Klein does not cover a lot of the important issues that is going on in terms of this Israeli-Palestine conflict, the genocide in Gaza. I figured that we actually talk about the story mostly because we have an update on this story, which is that a judge has found that Khalil can be deported. Now, this was something that was kind of left up in the air because of, the legal stature that exists when it comes to immigrants, that already existed, especially green card holders as well. But this did face some contest about whether or not it was going to happen because the Trump administration is just going extremely hard trying to push immigrants out of this country. Now, the way that we got here is that Khalil was essentially taken by ICE. He was a Columbia University grad student. As it says right here, Khalil, who was a Columbia University grad student, led pro-Palestinian protests there last year, was detained last month after Secretary of State Marco Rubio determined that Khalil had engaged in anti-Semitic protests and disruptive activities which foster a hostile environment for Jewish students in the U.S. Now, that doesn't mean they could just, black bag him and send him away, but they're trying their hardest to do so, and this is going to be a big precedent of what's going to come in the future of the United States, not just for green card holders, but also this is going to get to the point where even if you are a citizen and you're speaking bad against Israel, you're more than likely going to get targeted. Because this isn't just like because he's an immigrant. Like, this isn't just happening because he's a green card holder and not technically an official citizen. This is also because he is anti-Israel. So obviously that makes him a target for this Trump administration that is very pro-Israel. And it's only going to get worse. We're going to get to the point where they're going to do this with actual citizens, I feel like. In an undated 2-page memo submitted to the court, Rubio detailed that on March 7th he got information about Khalil from the Department of Homeland Security, and as a result he determined that allowing Khalil to remain in the country would undermine a U.S. foreign policy goal of combating anti-Semitism among the world. Interesting phrasing, more like, just helping Israel, just praising Israel. That's their foreign policy goal. They don't care about anti-Semitism. They don't. If they if they actually cared about anti-Semitism, there's plenty of people who would not be in the Trump administration right now. If they really cared about anti-Semitism, Trump wouldn't have had dinner with Nick Fuentes and Kanye West. During a hearing at the remote Louisiana detention center where Khalil is being held, Judge Jamie Commons said Friday that she had no authority to question Rubio's determination. Now, initially she did question about whether or not he could be deported. Like, she was like, apparently the judge was like, oh, I don't, see enough evidence that he could be, but all it took was just a little bit of pushback, and she was like, yeah, he could be. So this doesn't mean he's going to get deported. Obviously, this has to go to court now. But the fact that they're going to court based on such flimsy evidence, it's not good. I don't think so. Like, the fact that it's just so flimsy, and what's really terrible about this too, is the fact that they have him in Louisiana when he has a pregnant wife in New York City. As it says down here, they kind of buried the lead on this, I guess to like dehumanize him a bit. Khalil, 30, was arrested March 8th at the university-owned apartment building in New York City where he lives with his wife, a U.S. citizen who is pregnant. He was transported to the Gina LaSalle Detention Center in Gina, Louisiana, where he has been held since. So, a pregnant wife, miles and miles and miles away. Here's the letter that was sent to the judge, and just reading off of this, it's very clear that they barely have anything, and the fact that, there's a likelihood he still could be deported is insane. Information provided by the DHS, ICE, HSI regarding the participation and roles of Redacted and Khalil. Apparently there's another person whose name is not being shared right now, of Redacted and Khalil in anti-Semitic protest and disruptive activities, which fosters a hostile environment for Jewish students in the United States. Yet they don't lay out how these are, dangerous, hostile, or disruptive. They don't lay those out at all. My determination for blank is also based on blank citations for unlawful activity during these protests, the public actions and continued presence of blank and Khalil, and the United States undermining U.S. policy to combat anti-Semitism around the world and in the United States, in addition to efforts to protect Jewish students from harassment and violence in the U.S., blah, blah, blah. They do not give any detail over how Khalil and the redacted person were doing this, by the way. Just insane. There's also this video from Al Jazeera that we're going to cover that kind of goes over what we already talked about.
Well, we begin with breaking news. A few moments ago, a U.S. immigration judge has ruled that the Trump administration's deportation case against pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil can move forward. Well, we can speak with Shihab Bratunzi, who is live for us outside the Immigration Detention Center in Jena, Louisiana. Now, this has just happened, Shihab. So the judge has ruled that the deportation case can go ahead.
Mahmoud Khalil is removable, in the opinion of the judge. She said that the letter that the Secretary of State sent to the court detailing the reasons for the removal were reasonable. The letter Secretary of State explaining the reason is reasonable. The DHS, so the Department of Homeland Security, has met its burden, she said. However, Khalil is open to a relief application on April the 23rd. And there was a discussion of whether he be deported to Syria or Algeria. So these are the notes, the little clips that we have. No electronic devices were allowed in the courtroom. Khalil, we are told, was calm throughout the proceedings, and he did address the court. He said nothing is more important than due process and fundamental fairness. Neither of these principles were present. This is why the Trump administration sent me to this court thousands of miles from my family. So, this is all hinging on a letter that the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was ordered to send to the judge to explain why, in the Secretary of State's opinion, his personal judgment, Khalil, his presence in the United States was fundamentally detrimental to the foreign policy goals of the United States. Rubio didn't give any concrete evidence, any evidence whatsoever, really, of wrongdoing.
Essentially, the evidence they gave is bad vibes. That's it. Because there's nothing concrete that they pointed out of being like, here's why he should be deported. It's just vibes based. We just get bad vibes. We get anti-Semitic vibes but from him. That's it.
But what he said was he accepted that in the act Rubio is using, the Immigration and Nationality Act, the Foreign Policy Deportation Grounds clause, which was added specifically to protect people from deportation for constitutionally protected freedom of speech and freedom of association, he accepted that there was that safe harbor for freedom of speech and free association. He accepted in the letter that Khalil has done nothing illegal in the past or potentially in the future. But what the letter said was, I have made the personal determination that Khalil's presence is against our foreign policy objectives. And then Rubio cited the foreign policy objective of eradicating anti-Semitism around the world. He said that the anti-genocide protests at Columbia University, he characterized those as anti-Semitic. He said that they created an unsafe environment for Jewish students at Columbia University. And therefore, given that these protests, he was arguing...
Notice how, by the way, you always hear, these protests are making life uncomfortable for Jewish students at Columbia University. You always hear it from news pundits, from people who have something to gain from defending Israel, and never from the Jewish students themselves. Like, there was that one example of that one guy who was trying to get in the face of pro-Palestinian protesters and then made a big deal about it on social media. But everyone quickly found out that he was just a Zionist who was just trying to make himself look good or make the Palestinian protests look bad on purpose. Like, he wasn't there to actually get to class. He was just purely there to disrupt them. That's it. That's been the only proof. And you know that's been the only proof because if it wasn't, there would be so many clips that these people would run to, that they would bring up constantly. But they don't. They just say Jewish students don't feel safe there, but you never actually hear a Jewish student talking about how they feel unsafe at Columbia, probably because they're part of the protest too, by the way, because Jewish Voices for Peace literally is a big part of that protest.
Fundamentally anti-Semitic. Obviously, we were all there. We know that these were anti-genocide protests. Plenty of Jewish students were there. Because these protests, in his view, were anti-Semitic, therefore Khalil should be deported. That's it. No evidence of any wrongdoing on Khalil's part was presented.
Shihab, this seems that this will be, in many analysts' opinion, a landmark case because it seems to be at the heart of the Constitution with the right to expression of opinion. And then on the other side, the safety, as the US administration would argue, the safety of the United States and their defence. So what does this mean going forward for other cases and other people like Khalil?
Well, going forward now, so much relies on the appeal. Clearly, there will be appeal. Khalil is eligible for a relief application on April the 23rd. So this isn't over by a long shot. There will be more appeals. This legal process will continue, and that's one of the reasons, perhaps, why we're in Louisiana right now. Khalil was arrested in New York. He was briefly detained in New Jersey, so that's where actually the federal legal case about the constitutionality of Khalil's arrest is taking place, in New Jersey. But what the government did was they quickly and secretly bundled him off to this deportation center in Louisiana, instituted deportation proceedings under the the Immigration and Nationality Act, in order to get a parallel process underway. And therefore, to have this legal process take its course in a circuit court arena, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, if it gets that far, which is thought to be way more conservative, which is way more conservative than the arena in New York, the First Circuit Court, where any appeals will end up, which is thought to be more liberal. So you can see that the government always had a long-term plan. This is a long-term test of the limits of this administration's authority to deport any non-US born person in the country, permanent resident, perhaps eventually, by implication, naturalized citizen, without presenting any evidence, but on the say-so of the Secretary of State, that that person is detrimental to the US's foreign policy goals in the future. It's enormous. So, for example, because that would suggest then that, Marco Rubio could say, well, this person is against our universal tariffs on the entire world. That's our foreign policy goal. He hasn't done anything wrong. He may not do anything wrong, but his presence here is detrimental to our foreign policy goal of blanket tariffs on the rest of the world. Where does it end? Yeah. First, they came for the
it opens up a can of worms that the Trump administration probably wants to open up, of being like, we can just deport people for whatever. And it's going to get to the point where eventually they're just going to be like, well, we're going to extend it to civilians too, not even just immigrants. Like, we'll extend it to civilians and we'll kick them out or put them in camps. Sounding very familiar to, 1940s. We're almost at the 100-year anniversary. Maybe they're just trying, speed up the celebration for their party. I mean, what else needs to be said? This just feels like a giant leap, at least publicly. Because obviously what they've been doing with immigrants ever since they came into power has really shown how much they are willing to go towards fascism. But the fact that, even a legal process that is there to protect this person is just blatantly being suppressed, and just, this is a big violation of the legal process, of due process. The fact that they barely have anything on him and are still like, yeah, he could be deported. It shows that we are just speed running to the end of free speech, which is funny, seeing how the right wing loves to say that they're the party of free speech. They were trying to get this man deported because they didn't like his speech. That wasn't hateful. They were just like, hey, stop bombing kids in Gaza. But apparently that's hate speech. That's hate speech for Israel. You can't criticize a country. You can't criticize any country that we are in partnership with, or else we'll deport you. Hello everyone, thank you for watching today's video. If you would like to see more videos like this, please leave a like and subscribe down below. If you would like to check out my gaming videos, you can follow me at FruitySaur Gaming. And if you'd like to check out my podcast where I talk about anime, comics, movies, video games, and even pro wrestling, you can follow me at The Fruit Basket. But that's all I had to say for today. I'd like to thank you all for watching once again, and I will see you